What's up, and welcome back to another episode of Moving Mindset. Today we have the Calisthenics Project, aka Jason Lee. Jason is an expert at calisthenics. He's also a physical therapist. We talk about anatomy, we talk about the ups and downs of training. So if you're interested in calisthenics or in moving in general, listen to this episode. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Welcome, Jason Lee.
Yeah, it's going good. It's going good. I just came back from a deload week. So it's always nice after getting a week's worth of rest, giving your joints a break, connective tissue a break, and feeling a lot stronger than before I took this break. So it's good to be back at it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I'm also in a very tough training plan right now, like 6 sessions per week, 2 to 3 hours. And then I got sick and I had to take like 3 to 4 weeks off of training. And I came back and I smashed all PRs. It's crazy to think. Like usually we all have this thought like, I can't stop training, otherwise I'll lose all my gains. But it's quite the opposite, right?
Yeah, so before I was going to say that, it's interesting because usually I hear a lot of people who take deload weeks and then they come back and then they just start smashing PRs like left and right. When I come back, I actually am a little bit worse than I came back before because I feel like calisthenics, there's a big psychological aspect of it. There's a neural adaptation portion of all the exercises that we do. So I feel like when you take a week and a half off, that kind of fades. So when you come back, you're doing these like crazy movements. Like for example, I was doing handstand push-ups and human flag, which are very, very odd movements for the human body. It's like we weren't meant to do that. So I noticed like my first 2 sessions, I couldn't really do it well. But then once I get that neural adaptation back, oh my gosh, I feel way better than before I started deloading. So yeah. I don't know if you felt that way with handstands, where after you take a week off, your first few attempts, like, do they feel great? Or
100% not at all. It feels like, what am I doing? Like, it feels exactly what you're saying. Like maybe the first 2 sessions, also like the first handstand of the day is always like, oh, sometimes I almost overshoot it or I don't get it. And then like you need to, because it's like in handstands, of course, you have like the flexibility and strength, but it's a very technical thing, right? It's very like taxing on the nervous system. And so I totally agree with what you're saying. It's interesting that it's a similar experience. I hear that also from a lot of people.
yeah, right, right.
So about your deload structure, like how do you structure your deload? And why do you think it's so important to do deloads?
So deloads, it's funny you mentioned that because deloads is actually it's a weaker subject of mine. I'm still trying to get better at deloading because if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
26.
26. Okay, so I'm 23, and I was a collegiate athlete. I was a swimmer in college. I swam Division I. I was always about that, just grind, no rest and stuff like that. Very hard coach mentality where no days off and stuff like that. So I'm still trying to transition away from that mindset so that I can actually listen to my body and have good acumen when it comes to my physical capabilities. So it's something I'm still trying to get better at. Right now, I've been dabbling around. I've been trying to go deload every 5 weeks, but last time I did that, I felt like I had more in the tank. So this time I went about 6.5 to 7 weeks, and I was a little bit too shot at the end of that. So I think for the next cycle, I'm going to try and do about 6 weeks and then try and figure it out. You know what I mean? Kind of go with the feel. And in terms of the deload, what I will do is on my deload week, I train 6 days a week, just like you. On my deload week, I'll probably train about 3 days a week, and I'll keep it strictly body weight. So I don't do any of my weighted pull-ups. I don't do any of my weighted dips. I'll go in and do some jump rope cardio, body weight pull-ups, body weight rows, push-ups, just so I can move. I personally don't like just sitting around and doing nothing. I'm sure you're the same way. But yeah, so I'll do that, and then I'll keep I don't go anywhere near failure. Are you familiar with rate of perceived exhaustion, RPE scales and stuff like that? Are you familiar with that?
No, if you like, you can elaborate on that.
Okay,
Never
so
heard it.
yeah, basically it's how like RPE, it's on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being you are training till failure, and 1 being you're barely doing anything at all. And throughout my training week, my training cycles, I'll be at 7 to 8. So I'm training pretty hard. But deload week, I won't go any higher than a 5.
Oh, I get it.
So Yeah, so it's kind of like reps in reserve too. How many reps you have in reserve? Do you know what that is?
Yeah,
Reps in
yeah.
reserve.
How many you could have done
Yeah, it's
after
the
you
same.
quit.
Exactly. It's the same concept where, so, okay, like if I can do 20 pull-ups today until failure for deload week, I'll just go to 10 just so I can keep the movement, the specificity aspect on me. So yeah, that's how I usually handle deloads, but it's definitely by far my weaker subject in terms of area of knowledge and actually committing to the action. So it's something I got to work on, but that's what we're all doing, working on our weak points.
To hear that, because usually what I feel like for a lot of people, including myself, it's easier to take it easier, or to take it easy and to be like, okay, to cut yourself some slack and stuff. And what I hear from what you said, like you come from this background where you always went pretty hard and where you got taught that way and raised that way of like, okay, we go all out. And it's interesting because it's a controversial topic, right? So there's some, I don't know if you know, for example, Ido Portal and like the crazy movement guys. If you heard about him, Ido Portal.
I do not know.
Okay,
No.
I will have to
I
send
don't.
this guy to you. It's crazy, man. It's really crazy. And that is a guy, for example, he's very dogmatic, like very, it's one paradigm, and you either follow and make it or you don't. But his approach is
Right.
basically like, he calls it the dark zone, which is like the first couple of weeks you train with him, your body needs to adapt to the load. But once you're through this sort of valley of death, let's call it, you can just train and train without failure. And I've met some people. I think it's also a little bit like genetics and like what kind of sports you did before.
Yeah.
But when I was in another city in Germany, there was this one guy at the Calisthenics park. Training was his life. Like he was a real life anime character, man. He came to the park in the morning, trained for 3 hours.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, me too. He's like a massive beast, but also flexible. And he trains 3 hours in the morning. He goes home, eats, naps, comes back in the afternoon, trains for another 4 hours, like just flexibility and skills. And he does that every day, man. And it's like he also just said,
that's crazy.
my body just adapted. Like all of a sudden, I'm not tired anymore. But I gotta say now, I feel like I can go hard, but it's always periods. It's always for periods. Like whenever I work with my coaches, I try to go all in, like as you said, 6 days per week, 2-3 hours minimum, and then also eight or 9, or like sometimes even 10, especially in the first weeks, because it's so hard to keep up with the plan. But then I feel like afterwards, the body just needs some days where you don't go as hard to get all this information, sort of like, it's not very scientific the way I'm putting it right now, but to get it into the body and to actually adapt and to actually learn what was like, sort of to get it from the software into the hardware, basically. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I totally understand what you mean too. And yeah, because like you said, I came from a background where we were always just go, and swimming was a sport where it was year round, and we got 2 weeks off in a year. We were training 20 hours a week nonstop.
Wow.
So I was also used to that too. Yeah, it was insane.
Holy.
20 hours a week for the entire year competing. We would compete every weekend. It was intense. It was very intense. But when I originally, it kind of dives into how I started calisthenics, if that's okay, how we get into that. But yeah, so when I retired my senior year of college because that was my last season. After my 4 years of Division I swimming, I transitioned into calisthenics, and I took that same mentality of swimming into calisthenics, where it's no days off, spam, just do it until you get it. I mean, that's quite frankly how I learned how to do a muscle up. That's how I learned how to do a back lever, like handstands. Like all the basic moves was me just spamming. There was no science behind it. There was no like structure behind it. I was just spamming it until I got it. And if you're like 16, 15, 14, you can do that and you'll be fine because you recover so fast. And I know I'm still young, but at this time I was about 21, but my body can't handle the load like I could when I was 14. So eventually I was getting injuries from doing muscle ups. I was doing 30 to 40 muscle ups every single day for like a 4-month period. Yeah, it was
That's
insane. And
insane.
then
Yeah.
eventually my shoulder started hurting, my elbow started hurting, my wrists really started hurting. So that's when I had to like learn to like dial back. And then I didn't mention this, but I'm a physical therapy student. You guys might call it physiotherapy. You guys, it's referred to as physiotherapy a lot in Europe.
Hmm. Is it the same
But
thing
I'm a
though?
student physical therapist. It's essentially the
Okay.
same thing. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I'm a student physical therapist, student physiotherapist, and the more I'm learning about the human body from a scientific perspective and from a literature perspective with all the studies, I'm realizing more and more that okay, yes, like recovery is absolutely important because it's not just because muscles grow when you're resting. Muscles don't grow when you're at the gym and doing heavy weight. It's actually quite the opposite. You're tearing them apart. And sleeping and proper nutrition with protein and getting proper recovery is what helps grow the muscle.
Hmm.
And it's not just that, but your connective tissues also need a break. Your ligaments don't have direct blood supply, which is what blood supply is what promotes inflammatory process, so it heals. Um, and your ligaments don't have a direct blood supply, so they heal very, very slowly. So you have to be careful when you're training. If you injure your ligaments, they take a lot longer to heal than you straining your muscle, straining your bicep. You know what I mean?
100%.
And ligaments also, like once you injure them too, you're way more likely to get injured again. Because I mean, I had a wrist injury too. I damaged a complex called the TFCC on my wrist, and I have to be very careful with my wrist because I can injure it very quickly again. So once I started getting more scientific with my studies, I realized more and more, okay, like deloads and rest is very important. And once I started taking that seriously, I don't get injured nearly as much. Still have pains here and there, obviously, because training is inherently disruptive to your system. So it's going to happen. But yeah, I've learned of the importance of deload and getting away from that grind, grind, grind mindset, which I think is fine for a lot of very younger people, like 15, 16, because your body can handle that, you know? So,
Yeah, that's cool. Like while you mention it, this topic of injury. So I'm a hand balancer mainly, right? I started with calisthenics, but then I transitioned into mainly handstands, and now I do all the pushing and pulling just for maintenance and for skills I want to learn.
yeah,
Like I'm also a little bit skill driven, but my 90% of my focus lies on handstands and mobility, and therefore my wrists are also
yeah.
pretty sensitive.
Very impressive, by the way. Your handstands are great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's all I do. It's all I do. So if it wasn't great, I would be doing something wrong. But the wrists are fucking delicate, right? It's a delicate joint. It's not
Yeah,
designed to handle your entire body weight for those amounts of times. So my wrists are also very sensitive, and to a point you were making earlier, like what I found and what also my coaches that are like I got one coach, Harry Williams. He hasn't got like a scientific certificate, but whenever he's not training, he's reading on scientific literature, and he is very knowledgeable of the body.
right.
And he also gave me this approach of like not a big fan of like total rest. Total rest meaning like no stress at all, right? So even if my wrists hurt,
Yeah,
I still try to apply at least minimum amount of pressure, like working around the pain basically. How do you deal with
right.
injuries then? You mentioned you got injured a couple of times and now you're a physical therapist. Or you're studying to become a physical therapist. How do you deal with injuries? What is a good way to overcome that?
So yeah, that's a great question. So it honestly, it all depends on the severity of the injury. Is it something? Because for example, my wrist pain when I sprained my TFCC complex on my wrist, when that happened, it only hurt when I was doing pushing exercises. So if I was doing handstands, if I was training for like planche, if I was doing like a tuck planche, it would hurt. Dips would aggravate it. So kind of like what you said, I work around it. I can do what I can tolerate, what my body can tolerate. I noticed that my wrist pain wasn't that bad when I was doing pull-ups. So I took that time to really, really hammer pull-ups and front lever work and a bunch of other pulling exercises. And I also use that time to focus on a different like leg calisthenic exercises. You know what the dragon squat
Yeah,
is?
it's impressive.
Yeah, yeah. I got really good at dragon squats because of my wrist injury. So yeah, you can look at an injury where like, oh well, yeah, because being injured sucks, and you can look at it as a huge setback, and it might be for a certain segment of your skills. Like for me, it was the pushing strength, but you can also use that as an opportunity to grow in other areas, which for me was pulling and dragon squats and whatever that may be. And usually it's also a good idea sometimes to shift focus on one. So my push was injured, so I decided to shift my focus to my pull. It's a good idea every like 6 to 8 weeks, shifting that focus from push to pull to legs or whatever it may be, so that that muscle group can take a little bit of recovery and that connective tissue can get a little bit of recovery time as well. So in the overall grand scheme of things, if you like transition, so you certain time period you focus on push, then you focus on pull, then you focus on legs, and overall in the grand scheme of things, you grew overall in all of it. So when I injured my wrist, I didn't really look at it as too much of a setback, but as an opportunity to grow in other areas. And then I know that when I take this break, I can go back and do pushing and get better at pushing, and I can get better at all the disciplines now.
It's very impressive, that mindset. That is mad inspiring, because this also took me a long time to learn. And like, again, I'm also only 26, but you're 23 and you're already like so far ahead of many, many people. Like, it's not about being ahead or anything. I'm just saying that to make a point. But like, it's really, really nice. And I love that what you said. Like, it's really to work around it, and it's a paradigm shift, right? This is happening to me. Oh my God, it's so bad. Or it's like, what can I learn from this? It transfers to all aspects of life. It's not only like training, right?
Yeah. Because I mean, at the end of the day, if you can either do two things when something like that happens. You can either like cry about it, moan about it, say like, I wish it didn't happen, but like, what are you going to do about it? You don't have a time machine. You can't go back. Or you can kind of try and stay calm. I know it's hard. I struggle with it all the time too. And look at the broad picture and say, what can I do right now? There's a bunch of other skills right now. And like, it's also gratitude too. It's like, okay, my wrist sucks, but my shoulder's fine and I can pull fine and my legs are working fine. So it's not that bad, you know? But I also do want to preface by saying that I am, by no means have I mastered this concept. I can speak it very well, but I still am working on it myself. You know, I'll get an injury and I'll look like punch the floor and be like, this sucks, and complain about it. So I still have a lot of work to do in that regards too, but it's in my conscious. So I can, when I'm calm and logical, I know what to do.
All right. Yeah, it's great. Like, also this, I had this one thing where I had a traffic accident and I hurt my wrist a little bit, and then I had an upcoming handstand workshop from my teacher, and then I was like, oh, I was moping. I was like, oh, like I'm not gonna be able to perform. And he said also this, like, you know what? I'm a big fan of showing up as you are, and just come to the workshop, see what you can do. And then I went to the workshop and I had some wrist pain, but I could lean into the pain. It was not like, okay, I'm gonna kill my wrist if I do this now. But it's also not like, okay, at the first sign of pain, I gotta stop. No, it was quite the opposite. The more I did handstands, the less pain I actually had in the end. And the more it was also an opportunity for growth, to see like, okay, how maybe if I focus more on technique, I don't need to rely too much on my wrist strength. And in the end, it was actually like one of the best workshops I ever attended. I learned so much also about myself and the way I tell myself stories. Because I have so many times I'm like, I don't really want to train today, or like, I'm feeling a little bit fatigued. And then once I go and I actually train, it's like, why did I even cry about it? Like, I feel amazing now. Like,
yeah.
And I feel like,
no, once you get a couple good reps in, it's all about the momentum that you build.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like that's also something for a lot of beginners, especially people like you were already pretty accustomed to exercising. And me too. I came from martial arts, and it was always like, okay, I go. Doesn't matter how I feel. But like, I feel, for example, especially beginners that don't have like a very moving background or like a history of exercising, they could struggle with that, and also with a lot of other things. So if somebody that is listening to this wants to get into calisthenics, like, what would be your, like, what are the most important things? Like, what do you wish you knew before going into calisthenics?
Yeah, no. So that's a great question. I'm excited to talk about this. So first of all, this is going to sound kind of weird at first, but I have an explanation. invest some time into understanding basic anatomy, learning some anatomy, because that goes such a long way. When you go into a certain discipline of exercise and you understand anatomy, you understand what muscles do what, that can help you so much. Even just, okay, your biceps have two functions. It supinates the wrist and it flexes the elbow. Okay, so when I do pull-ups, then my biceps are working. When I do chin-ups, my biceps are working. And then you can start to incorporate all this information and lock it together. It's like, okay, my pushing strength is kind of weird. It's kind of not weird. It's kind of bad. Let me look up what muscles are responsible for pushing. Okay, you have the triceps, you have the anterior deltoids, and you have the pecs. Okay, so when you do a dip, okay, that's pushing. Push up, that's pushing. You can start to incorporate. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah,
Like
100%.
you can start to incorporate all of this knowledge, and it goes such a long way. Because a lot of people that lift weights, you'd be surprised how many people don't know their basic anatomy. I see sometimes where people don't even realize that doing rows works your shoulders, and people don't understand that because your posterior delts, your rear delts are a shoulder extender, not a shoulder flexor. So just stuff like this, it can really help you gain a lot of knowledge and help you progress really well. So I would say you don't have to go crazy with the anatomy. I go crazy with the anatomy because I'm literally studying it. It's going to be my career. So you don't need to know what nerve innervates your shoulder, like, oh, the axillary nerve does that. No, you don't need to know that. Just know the basic muscles, know the basic actions that they do. Okay. Shoulder flexion is anterior delt. Elbow flexion is biceps brachii. Just know basic stuff like that, and then recreate those movements, and you're working those muscles. It's super, super simple, really. It doesn't have to be very complicated. So yeah, I would spend a good amount of time, not crazy, but just studying your basic anatomy. There's a bunch of YouTube videos that show you basic anatomy. And also another thing is, if you know your anatomy, you can discover and find out the bad fitness content on social media, because there's a lot of that out there. And there's a lot of bad information on social media about fitness content. If you know the basic anatomy, you can kind of, your bullshit detector gets a little bit better. Be like, okay, like that's just not what that muscle does. I don't know why they're saying this. So yeah, so learning your basic anatomy can really go a long way. And then another thing that I think beginners should know before starting their calisthenics journey is spend a lot of time on fundamentals. Get stronger at push-ups, pull-ups, dips, planks, core exercises. A big mistake I did going to calisthenics is I jumped right into skills because I wanted to do it. And I'm not saying you can't train your skills right off the bat, but focus on getting more athletic, getting better, like push-ups, pull-ups, dips. Those are great exercises to get better pulling and pushing strength. And get good with those, and then start incorporating some skills. And in the beginning, if you don't have that much of an athletic background and you want to get into calisthenics, I would say 80% of your first 6 months to a year should be really getting good at fundamentals. And then the other 20%, yeah, you can dabble around some skills. Learn the L-sit, learn to muscle up, start your sessions off with a few attempts. But you gotta do the fundamentals, because at the end of the day, calisthenics is its strength, and the best way to develop strength is by doing those compound calisthenic movements.
I wish I heard what you just said right now when I started out, because I completely feel
Me
seen
too.
when you said that. Yeah, I was like, I just want to get the muscle up, and I lacked like complete upper back basic development. Like my upper back and my scapula is still like my weak link. It's also interesting that you said that, because understanding anatomy also allows you to identify your weak links. And like, I've been training for a little while,
absolutely.
but my weak links have been always lagging behind. And all of a sudden I started investing just the tiniest bit of effort into that. And all of a sudden, like, all the skills unlock, because like my scapula was just holding me back, like proper protraction, proper retraction, just understanding, getting the mind-muscle connection, right? And knowing how to target and do what you're actually supposed to do. And that also gets easier when you know where the muscle is, right? Creating a mind-muscle connection. And the second point with the foundational strength, amazing value. And what is like because I 100% agree, because you need a basic capacity. If you don't have the capacity, meaning like, let's just say bluntly, muscle mass, you need a certain amount of muscle mass to pull your body up to do the muscle up. Like, it's also very technical, but if you don't have the strength, you're not going up there, no way. So would
Right.
be your top tips to build foundational strength, basically? What would a good split look like? What would you suppose you just have to write a plan for the average person? Does the question make sense?
Yeah. So that obviously depends on the person because there are so many factors to everybody. You don't know what their body fat percentage is, you don't know what their height is, their background. Some people have more sensitive joints than others, so they can't train 6 days a week. My recommendation is, at least for all beginners, is at least 3 days a week to start off, with a pushing exercise day and a pulling day and then a leg day. And if you can do, as you progress and as you are getting better at that, then yeah, bump it up to 4, bump it up to 5. I don't think you need to jump right in guns blazing 6 days a week, 2 hours a day. I think that'll set you up for injuries and burnout, especially if you're new. Burnout's going to be very, very real when it comes to that. But in terms of a proper split, it's pretty similar to weightlifting, but you just replace it with calisthenics, So if you go in for a push day, you're going to do dip focused work, push up focused work, pike push ups. Pull day, you could go in for pull ups, chin ups, Australian rows, whatever that may be. Leg day, do bodyweight squats, learn how to do pistol squats, sissy squats. There's a bajillion different squat variations as well. And I would say all 3 of those days incorporate some type of core exercise in there too, because your core is the crux of your body. It's absolutely important. It's used in every single movement. It's being used right now as we're sitting up on a chair, or if you're standing, our core is engaged right now to hold us up, or we just fall to the side. So it's important to train your core all the time. So not all the time, on all 3 of those days, excuse me. So doing that is absolutely important. And then your skills, you should also split it into a push skill, pull skill, leg day skill. I would avoid making the mistake I did, where I just went in and did muscle ups every single day. You could do a pushing skill. So you could work on handstands or pike push-ups or whatever it may be. A pull skill, you can do like tuck front levers, like very beginning levels of like the front lever or whatever it may be. And yeah, just separate that and then give your joints some rest, because calisthenics and handstands very hard on your joints. So make sure you're resting properly. And nutrition too. It's very important to making sure you're eating well and trying to be lean. Calisthenics is body weight. It's relative strength. The higher your body fat is, the harder it's going to be. I'm sure you felt that too. After a bulk, you try and do like handstands or something like that. It's a lot harder. And I'm sure you can even attest, even shoes on makes such a big difference. Shoes on versus off makes a wild difference. And that's only like 2 pounds. So making sure you stay lean and eating clean makes a big difference.
I feel like those were some valuable tips. There's so many loops we just opened where we could go in. The first thing that comes to mind, you've listed like some skills, some beginner-friendly skills. But what is like, if you were to list them in like one segment, like what would be the first beginner skills people can attempt to do that will take them, that won't come like immediately, but still are like in reachable distance? You know what I mean?
I would say if you're starting calisthenics and you're working on push-ups and pull-ups and all of that, I would say the L-sit is my go-to recommendation. I've made so many L-sit tutorials on my page, and I've made them for a reason, because majority of my following are beginners. And I want to emphasize that the L-sit is such a great exercise. It teaches you to really engage your core in a compressive manner. It engages your triceps. It helps you develop that straight arm strength that you're going to need for handstands, push-ups, and all these other skills, that human flag, even when you get to the more advanced exercises. It teaches you to engage your shoulders, proper depression and all of that, your hip flexors. So I would say the L-sit is a very, very beginner-friendly exercise. And I remember when I first started calisthenics, I was learning that, and I was humbled instantly because I was like, I thought my core was strong, but doing an LSIT really humbled me because it wasn't as easy as I thought. So I would say LSIT's a great one to learn. And then I personally wish I started handstand training a little bit earlier. I pushed that off until about I was like 9 months into my calisthenics journey. I wish I started a little bit earlier. I think it's definitely doable for a lot of people if you get some good, straight arm strength. Like I said, that LSIT comes in handy when you're straight arm strength, because when you jump into a handstand for the first time, if you bend your arms, you're going to fall on your face. You know what I mean? So you want to make sure you can engage your triceps enough to where you can keep that elbow locked out so you can go into a handstand. So I wish I trained that earlier. And then depending on your mobility, I think pistol squats are also a great exercise that you can aim to learn. I know a lot of people have ankle mobility and hip mobility issues that prevent them from getting a pistol squat, but I don't think that movement requires as much strength as people think it needs. It's really not too difficult. It's mainly a mobility issue that prevents most people from doing pistol squats. And then finally, I would say muscle-ups are also a great beginner-friendly goal. If you can get to, in my opinion, there's no objective data on this, but 8 to 10 pull-ups relatively easily, like you can consistently do it to the point where if someone's like, hey, do 8 pull-ups right now. All right, no problem. Does 8 pull-ups, pretty easy. If you can do that, and then you can do a handful of dips, I'd say it's a matter of just technique of learning the right swing of, getting up to the muscle up on top of the dip. So yeah, I would say LSIT, pistol squat, and muscle up. Hey, that actually works out perfect because, LSIT's more of a pushing exercise, muscle up's a pull exercise, and then pistol squat's a leg exercise. So there you go, beginners. You got 3 skills you can do for your push-pull legs.
No, now there's really no more excuse to not start it. And I feel like,
right?
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, I feel like if you were to look at all sports, and this is just my opinion, like I'm it's not science backed, but if you look at like calisthenics athletes or even like gymnasts, which is like maybe like even a level higher because they have like so much flexibility, but also like can use that flexibility and access it actively. I think if you put gymnasts, they are like, or maybe also ballet dancers, the most well-rounded athletes, where if you would put them in any sport, they would make progress probably significantly faster than the average human being. But then, like, for example, if you were to put a football player, nothing against football, but if you were to put them into gymnastics, they would sink. They wouldn't be able to just do it because, and calisthenics is like, I feel like a more accessible version of gymnastics, where it's not like, okay, you need to be this flexible and we're gonna train and condition for hours on end, but it's also like, if you start doing calisthenics, it's gonna affect every aspect of your life because it's functional strength.
Absolutely. It's funny, you saying that just reminded me of a funny example. I was at Cancun with my family about a year ago, and we were on a boat, and then we were snorkeling around. And then after snorkeling, we had to get back on the boat. And I noticed everybody was struggling to pull themselves up to the boat and try and get on top of the boat. And at this point, I had about around a year's worth of calisthenics experience, and I was doing muscle ups a lot. And I noticed I just went right up, no problem. So it's funny you mentioned that. It just reminded me of that example.
It's a perfect example, and it illustrates what I was saying really well, because we are very comfortable right now. We like, of course, there's wars happening on the world, but we in the West, we have a very comfortable life. Technically, you can, if you have an online job, you can sit down in a chair, you can deliver food, you can get all that. But once you're in a situation somewhere where something really serious is happening, I don't know, you're hiking in the mountains, or even stuff like the other day I was in the train station, and I don't know how you call that, but basically the mechanism that only opens, it's like a push-through mechanism. When you show your ticket, then only it works. Otherwise, it's locked in. And that was blocked. It didn't work.
Right.
But my ticket was valid. So what I did, I just put my hands onto the railing left and right and just L-sit my way over
and you
there.
Raised yourself.
And it was so easy. It was just like, yeah, okay. But if you were to put the average human in that task. I feel not many people could do it, and it's potentially like
No.
I'm exaggerating knowingly, but on purpose. But it could save your life. Honestly, it could save your life in certain
No,
situations.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, obviously, if we're taking to the extreme, if you're on a cliff and you fall and you're dangling off the cliff, the person who can muscle up is going to live. The person who can't is not going to.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but
It's completely valid. Like if you're listening to this now, you know you
yeah,
need to learn the muscle up. There's no way around it.
exactly. Right. People always say muscle up is a useless exercise until you're dangling off a cliff. Like,
Who's laughing now? On the term
right.
of
That's what I'm
that,
saying.
so the muscle up was also one of the first exercises I tried to learn skill-wise, and with that, especially with the beginner's mindset and with the beginner's status, there's lots of mistakes happening, and I reckon you talk to a lot of beginners also. And what are some common mistakes that I feel like you touched on some of them probably already, but if we can hear them in one go, what are some common mistakes you encounter, and maybe you can also provide like an antidote to them or like a remedy.
Yeah. So on the topic of muscle ups, it was actually one of the things I wanted to talk about. So I see so yeah, I'm going to get into the topic of muscle ups and a lot of mistakes that beginners make with with muscle ups specifically. I see a lot in the calisthenic community where people bash people who do muscle ups with a swing using momentum. And I wholeheartedly disagree with this mindset. I think swinging is perfectly fine to learn the muscle up because it helps you get down the actual muscle up. It helps you get the specificity down of transitioning around the bar. Because a muscle up, you're not just pulling up, it's a pulling around the bar, right? And when I say swing, I don't mean CrossFit swing where you are like bringing your chest and swinging and your arms kind of like stay locked out around the bar. Like there's no elbow flexion involved in CrossFit muscle ups. I'm just talking about you swing forward, bring your knees a little bit up to your chest, use that momentum to help you get high enough to learn the transition. And then what you can do is you can do the dip, and then you can control the negative motion down in a strict manner. And the negative motion is something I missed out on a lot when I first started doing calisthenics because there's a lot of strength and gains to be made on eccentrics. Because I don't know if you know this, but your body can tolerate more load on the eccentric than the concentric, which, it makes sense. Most people can do a push-up going down eccentrically because your body can tolerate that load, but concentrically they can't do it. So use that to your advantage. Make the concentric muscle up a little bit easier by adding a little bit of leg drive, a little bit of swing, and then control the movement down. And also, not many people learn the muscle up strict right away. I don't know why there's so much hate towards people who muscle up with, a little bit of kip, because who is learning the muscle up first try without using any momentum? I don't know even the best of the best calisthenics athlete, at one point, they used momentum to learn the muscle up. It's perfectly okay. If anything, I would rather you muscle up with a lot of kip than try and do it strict with like a chicken wing and bring one shoulder up first and then the other first and then risking impinging your shoulder. So if you're someone who's a beginner and wants to learn the muscle up, ignore all the critiques of using kip, using momentum. Use momentum. It's going to be a friend. Use momentum and use bands. Use them both and control the negative, and you'll be able to get the muscle up no time. So I wholeheartedly disagree with this no kipping or it's not a muscle up mindset. It's still a muscle up. You're just using assistance. So
yeah, it's a different beast, man. Like the slow and controlled muscle up, concentric, is like I wholeheartedly agree with the kipping. Like to this day, like I'm not training a lot of muscle ups. I can still pump out a few reps, but all with kip. Like controlled, I can do it controlled on the rings. Funnily enough, I learned it on the rings first. Many people say the rings is harder. For me, I could do it on the rings for like half a year until I learned how to do it on the bar, because it's like such a different movement. You mentioned some support. you mentioned like briefly the bands and the swinging. What would be because now you mentioned the specific skill of the muscle up, and I feel like a lot of people want to learn that. What would be in your opinion, a good progression plan to get there? Like, let's say somebody can do 5 pull-ups or something, and you're at that point, they are decently strong. Like, what's the next step? How should they progress it?
So yeah, I would say if you are about at 5 to 6 pull-ups, I would say it's fine if you try and attempt it. I think it'll be a little bit difficult if you can only do 5 pull-ups, and it depends if it's like if you do 5 pull-ups and you're absolutely gassed, you can't do anything more, then yeah, I don't think you're going to get the muscle up. But if you can do 5 pull-ups and you have a lot in the tank, then sure, yeah, go for it, try it. But I would say training till you can do at least 8 to 10 pull-ups, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, to the point where you can just crank them out whenever someone tells you, hey, do 8 to 10 pull-ups, and you can do it. Then yeah, I would start doing that. And then I would watch a lot of videos and understanding the swing and learning how to swing and engage the proper swing, because you are going around the bar. You're not just going up past the bar, you are going around the bar. So learn how to engage the proper swing and ignore all the critiques where people are saying, oh, you can't swing, you can't kip, blah, blah, blah. So I would have a person start off with dead hangs, learn knee to chest raises so they can understand that leg drive. Does that make sense? The knee drive, where I'm saying like you bring your knees to your chest to you like propel you up. So I would work on a bunch of knee to chest raises, and I would work on the bottom half. So just jumping onto the bar, swinging forward, bringing the knees to your chest, and try and go as high as you can every single time. Does that make sense?
100%.
So yeah, you stand behind the pull-up bar, you jump on the pull-up bar, swing, and at the peak of the momentum, you drive your knees up to the chest to try and go around the bar. You might not go all the way around, but practice that movement. Specificity is a very important thing in calisthenics. There's a strength component and a specificity aspect. This is a specificity aspect. So try and do that. Learn the swing. And while you're learning the swing, grab an resistance band. Or if you have a pull-up bar that's low, do jump muscle ups. Understand the transition. And then the most important thing is control that negative as best you can. Because the better you can control that negative, the sooner you're likely to unlock that muscle up. So
those are some great tips. Like, one visualization that helped me a lot is I always try to imagine I'm a T-Rex, if that makes sense. So like my arms are like more as if my arms were glued like this to the front of my body, because that prevents my shoulders locking all the way out, because it's very hard to pull yourself back into this position once you lost the pulling down of the scapula. So I try to, and that's also what I tell people, and what helped a lot of people actually also unlock their first muscle up, is to put your arms a little bit in front of the body and to keep them bent, and to imagine you're like this little T-Rex, and then jumping up but maintaining sort of this bent position of the arms. And then like if you combine that with what you said with the knees to chest, it's almost like you're gonna feel a huge shift in paradigm. If you've only done pull-ups so far, the muscle up feels very different. It is a very different dynamic where it's not just up, because a pull-up you can do as explosively as you want. You will never go over the bar. It won't happen if you do the same type of pull-up all the time. So same with planche, or if you want to learn like a handstand push-up or something. If you only ever do pull-ups, you could go to 1 million pull-ups. I would argue that you won't be able to hold a tuck planche, because the movement is so, you need to understand how to coordinate the different muscle groups together. I tell many people that are like into bodybuilding, like, hey, do a tuck planche, and they can sort of hold it. But when I tell them lock your elbows, keep the arms straight, it's impossible. They cannot do it because they are just not used to exerting pressure in that position.
It's because, and I mentioned earlier, that's because there is a strength aspect and a specificity aspect, and both are equally as important as one another. Just because you can overhead press doesn't mean that you can do a handstand push-up. Yeah, you may have the strength aspect, but the specificity aspect is gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And it's so interesting to hear it, because I feel like you put it very well into words. Like, these are concepts that make sense, and that was somewhere in the back of my mind, and I resonate a lot with what you're saying. But the way you right now put it with the specificity aspect really tied some knots together in my brain, for lack of a better wording.
And that's where you have to incorporate both. Because, for example, for me personally, I told you I was a swimmer for 16 years. So I naturally had very, very strong pulling strength. I was always able to crank out 20 to 30 pull-ups for 10 years. And I unlocked one arm pull-ups with 8 days of training. So like pulling strength came very, very naturally. Yeah, pulling strength came very, very naturally to me. However, pushing was a big weakness for me. I recently just unlocked handstand push-ups. My shoulder strength, my pushing strength has always been a limiting factor in just my overall athleticism. Because, I mean, it makes sense because in swimming you don't push, you're just pulling all the time. So, and I remember I wanted to get down the handstand push-up, and I could do a very good handstand. I got the handstand down very well, but I had a very big strength issue. So what I did was I combined strength and specificity. So for strength, I would do overhead press with a barbell or dumbbells, and I would do weighted dips to get my overall pushing strength back up. And for specificity, I would do a handstand, and I would try and control the negative as best as I can. I couldn't do the concentric because I didn't have the strength to do it, but I would go in a handstand, control the negative, and then also do a bunch of elevated pike push-ups to get that movement pattern down. And then I was able to unlock the handstand push-up. So I worked on the specificity aspect and the strength aspect and combined them, and then you can get a lot of results. And that's where, going back to the point I made earlier, that's why I think anatomy knowledge is so important for a lot of people. And I see so many content creators on Instagram that are posting fitness advice that seem like they don't even understand their basic anatomy, and it's like very bad fitness advice. And the reason I'm making that point again is because I understood when I couldn't do a handstand push-up, it's not just my anterior delts that are weak because I can't do this handstand push-up. Triceps are a very big part of this movement. I am extending my arm with my entire body weight. That is hard on my triceps. That's why I did so much weighted dips, because that really strengthened my tricep. It's like, okay, the stronger my tricep is, the easier I'll be able to lock out my elbows. Because locking out my elbows isn't in a handstand push-up, isn't the work of my anterior delts. My anterior delts just do shoulder flexion. So I worked on anterior delts with pike push-ups and overhead press, and I worked on my tricep strength for my elbow extension. And then you combine that, and I noticed a drastic difference of being able to push myself up in a handstand push-up. So that's why anatomy knowledge is so important. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't understand, like, hey, like, I need to work on my triceps too. It's not just my shoulders. So
that also just made a lot of sense to me, because I knew, like, okay, yeah, triceps is for pushing, but I never thought about, like, I'm the perfect example right now. Like, I would say I have a better understanding of anatomy than maybe the average person, but still not a very, like, I would not say I'm very good at anatomy. And now you're saying, like, the tricep is basically responsible for locking out the elbow. And it's an important part of any pushing movement, but especially in a handstand push-up, right? Like, of course, like a little bit, it also, like, your body dynamics play a role. Like, you need to keep your hip a little bit backwards to make it easier and all that stuff. But if your anterior delts are super strong, but you still cannot do it, looking back and analyzing the anatomical mechanics of it, and understanding, okay, but I need a strong triceps too, and all of a sudden you could do it. That's amazing, man. Like,
exactly.
just proves
Yeah, that's
the
why I
power.
can't emphasize enough. That's why I can't emphasize enough. Having a basic anatomy knowledge will go such a long way. Because if I didn't have that anatomy knowledge, I probably still can't do a handstand push-up, because I'll just be spamming pike push-ups and spamming, which, sure, it can get me there, of course, because pike push-ups also still work your triceps. But if I didn't do a lot of, weighted dips and I'm trying to focus on my triceps, I might not be at the level I am today. So the ability to have the acumen to be able to understand how your body works and what you need in that moment is so critical, because you have to lay back and understand. So we'll still talk about the handstand push-up. Okay, I can't handstand push-up. Why? Can I do a handstand? Let's say you can. Okay, I can do a handstand, but I can't do a handstand push-up. So it's a strength issue. All right, it's a strength issue. And then, all right, now I got to figure out where am I lacking strength in? All right, well, let's look up what are the major pushing muscles. All right, I looked up what are the major pushing muscles. All right, it says your pectoralis major, your triceps brachii, anterior delt. In this position, your pecs aren't in the most mechanically advantageous position to work. So it's not working that much. It works, of course, a little bit because nothing's absolute in your body. Everything's working a little bit. So yeah, but it's not the main factor. If I wanted to do my chest, I would do push-ups or bench press where my pecs are in a better mechanically advantaged position. So, all right, so let's rule that out for now. I don't think it's because I have weak pecs. All right, anterior delts and triceps. Let me think about it. It says anterior delts do shoulder flexion, which is exactly what I'm doing in a handstand push-up. And then it says triceps brachii, I do elbow extension. Oh, gee, I need a lot of that in handstand push-ups. All right, so let me focus on those two muscle groups for right now. And let's see how I feel in a couple months while also still doing handstands for the specificity aspect. Once you can think like that, once you have the acumen built up like that, and you combine those elements and stay patient, you can do wonders.
Amazing, because that also kind of answers the next question I was going to ask, but I'm going to ask it regardless, which would be like, how should you, in your opinion or in your observation, set goals in calisthenics to stay motivated and to see progress? Because calisthenics is very, it's difficult, man, and sometimes it can be very frustrating.
Absolutely.
So what are some ways that you stay on track?
So I would say from learning from my mistakes, stick to 1 or 2 skills per muscle group at a time. Stick to 1 pushing skill, stick to 1 pulling skill, stick to 1 leg skill, and focus on that. 2 at max if you're getting a little bit more advanced. It's my opinion. Like I said, I'm not saying this is the best way, but from my experience, if you try and tackle too many things at once, 1, your joints will hate you. Your joints will be fried and it's going to hurt a lot. And 2, you're just going to be beat. You're just not going to be able to get as much volume in for every exercise. I made this mistake a lot when I was training I was training 1-arm pull-ups, human flag, and front lever. And what else was I training? I was doing that. And then, dragon flags. I was doing like
Jesus.
4 different pulling skills at once.
Jesus Christ.
Every pull day, I would start off with front lever, then go to human flag, then do 1-arm pull-ups, then dragon flag. Like I was doing all of these things and I wasn't progressing that much. And then I was like, okay, like I need to shift course. I need to try something else. And then I would dedicate my pull sessions to human flag or a 1-arm pull-up. And I made so much more progress because I could accumulate more volume in those exercises. So I would do that, focus on one thing at a time, which requires patience because, you're not going to unlock these skills in 3 weeks. I mean, some people might. Like I unlocked 1-arm pull-up in 8 days, but it's not for every skill and it's not for everybody. So you have to be patient. But I mean, if you're going into calisthenics thinking you're going to get all this down in 1 year, you got a lot to learn. So be patient. The awesome thing about calisthenics is there's no time limit. Like you don't have to get all these down in the next year or 2. You got the rest of your life to do this. So what's the point in injuring yourself, hurting yourself when you have your entire life to achieve these things? Yeah, it'd be nice if you could get it down sooner and be the best sooner, but have realistic expectations and just stick to one thing at a time. And then I would say the other second most important thing kind of ties into my first one. Don't set time limits up for yourself for certain skills. I've done this before. And I think it's honestly a terrible thing to do because you're going to set yourself up for failure. Because even with handstands, I'm sure you said in the beginning, you still have days where you can barely kick up on the first few tries. And you've been training focusing handstands for so long now. And there's ups and downs all the time. I see so many Instagram reels where it's like day 1 of 50 of learning handstand. You've seen these types of videos, right?
Especially stuff like that.
Day 1 of 30 of learning whatever. And I'm just like, this is horrible way to do it, because by day 30, you're not going to be near where you want to be. And if anything, after day 30, you might be worse than what you were before, because there's ups and downs to everything. So don't make videos where you're saying day 1 of 50 of learning a muscle up, day 1 of just do it. If you want to track your progress, just say day 1 of learning muscle up, day 2 of learning muscle up, and be happy with the ups and downs. But don't set time limits up for yourself, because that's going to be very disappointing for you. Because I made that mistake where I remember last year, before I did my first bulk, I was like, oh, before the year ends, I have to do a handstand push-up. And I didn't reach that goal. One, because I was not training in the smartest way. I got injured and all that stuff held back. And 2, I was bulking, and missing your expectations. It just sucks. It's not a great feeling for anybody. So just have the goal of what you want to achieve, and just be open-minded to the fact that you will have ups, you will have downs. You just need to stay consistent. And if something's not working, readjust.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Just quick, this is not going to be in the podcast, so it's almost 1 hour. If it's cool for you, I will ask one final question. But if you have to bounce, it's totally fine. I really enjoy this, man. I feel like we could go on for a lot longer. You're a really cool guy, man.
We could do multiple episodes too, bro. I'm enjoying this too, man.
I'm down, 100%. I down on that offer. Like, we can take off where we left off. So for the final question, this is my favorite question, and this is a question that I always ask in the end. So imagine like a fairy comes and she swings her wand. Okay. Like, poof, you lose all your skills. You lose all your skills. You start at 0, but you keep your brain. You know how to get there, but you had no handstand push-up, not even a muscle up, not even a pull-up. You have nothing, but you know how to get there. What would you do to get back to where you are right now? How would you tackle that?
Oh man, I love this question. I'm glad you asked that, because I think about something like this too. If I started over with the knowledge, I would absolutely use weight. And I know that sounds crazy because it's calisthenics, it's body weight. But for the longest time, I had this mentality of, oh, I'm going to be the guy who never touches a weight. I'm going to be the guy that just uses body weight, get a calisthenics physique and be really cool and all that. And just be an aberration within the population. And it's sick because do something that most people don't. Most people get strong with weights and stuff like that to be able to say, oh, I've never touched a weight before. That's cool. But that was very foolish thinking of me, because a big reason why I'm able to do a lot of the things I do now is because of weighted calisthenics. Because strength is so important in this sport. And being able to do pull-ups is great. But being able to do pull-ups with 45 kilos is unbelievable. And when you're training with pull-ups and dips with 45 kilos or 25 kilos or whatever you're at, and you take that off, your relative strength gets way, way better. And that's something I really regret not doing earlier, because I didn't touch a single weight for my entire first year, maybe 1.2 years, like something like that. I went all that time without any weight. And I also didn't do weight dips either my first entire year. I just did push-ups. I wish I did dips. And weighted dips have been the biggest game changer for me. I really think weighted dips is a big reason why I got the handstand push-ups down, because I got so strong from those. And I would really, really change the way I approach calisthenics by adding more weight earlier on, because it's made the biggest difference in all of my skills.
Hands down, it's such a good point that you make. And I heard this argument also a lot, because it, I feel like hypertrophy, like the pure growth of a muscle, also plays a role, no? Because the bigger your muscles are, the more you just have more capacity. You have more capacity.
The more you can generate, the more muscle fibers the more muscle fibers activate and be able to. That's why it's important to do a hypertrophy phase and then follow up with a strength phase, because when you hypertrophy, you gain more muscle mass, and then with that more muscle mass, you can output more strength. So.
And it's the gnarliest juiciest feeling. Like from like my PR with dips is 40 kilograms, I think, for 1 or 2 reps. Haven't done them in a while, but I feel like I could still crank out one. And like just seeing this weight dangling down and you're like pushing up and then like locking out your elbows and then taking that weight off afterwards, it feels like you could fly. You could fly and do 1 million dips. It's exactly what you said. It just does something to you. So what I was saying is like, I feel this is one of the most, if not the most important takeaway from this podcast. Like if you take away one thing, it's this, I would say, to not be afraid to incorporate weights, man, and to
Oh, absolutely.
like.
I would
such a
also
good
like
point.
to add. I also agree that's the most important takeaway. However, I also think the most important takeaway as well is know your anatomy.
100%.
Because when you know your
Yeah.
anatomy and you know what your weaknesses are and you start targeting those weaknesses because you understand science and how your body works, you're going to progress like you've never been before.
Amen to that, man. I got nothing to add. Jason, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Before we close it out, I'm going to put all your links, all your stuff in the show notes. Anything you would like to say to the viewer before we close this out?
So yeah, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on TikTok and on YouTube. I'm just the Calisthenics Project. Right now, I am working on some products and some courses online on my website. I have a website. It's tcpcalisthenics.com. I am offering one-on-one coaching right now. I have 2 spots available. So if you're listening to this right now and you're interested in coaching, head on to my Instagram, head on to my website, DM me. We can get you set up. But other than that, yeah, it's been great. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
Pleasure is mine, man. And till the next time.
Yeah, let's definitely do this again. I really enjoyed that.
Super glad to hear that.
Alright guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you learned something from this, please like this episode or share it with a friend. Follow the podcast, and also don't forget to follow Jason on Instagram. His links are all in the show notes. I wish you a nice rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.